It looks like we're finally going to get that audit of the Fort Knox gold supply, so I guess the next thing we have to consider is what happens if it's not there. So news in the gold space has gotten pretty weird lately and a little bit loose on facts, but part of that is simply because of the lack of transparency. Now, I don't like to propagate the tall tales that usually insinuate that gold or silver are going to the moon, but I think that we can separate the two, the stories and these wild predictions, the wild price explosions, and at least work through some of what these possible but unlikely situations could mean. So in that spirit, let's talk about what happens if the gold in Fort Knox is gone. Now, I've seen a lot of videos covering the gold in Fort Knox topic. Some of them even take a swing at what would happen if the gold turns up missing. A few of these mention that it's a little bit strange that the focus is only on Fort Knox since it only holds 147.3 million troy ounces of the US total 261.5. That's something like 56% of US Treasury holdings, and it's an important detail, but there's a really simple explanation. It's just easier to suggest that Fort Knox doesn't have any gold because that's been a popular theory for 50 years. Now, quick shout out to Summit Metals. If you're looking for gold and silver, they have great prices. Their premiums on Eagles in particular are as low as I've seen them in a very long time. So check them out, see for yourself, summitmetals.com. So back to what happens if the gold held in Fort Knox is no longer there. Maybe first, what others have been saying happens. Their suggestion seems to be that if the U.S. didn't have the gold reserves that it says it does, we'd see a huge swing toward zero confidence in the dollar, and that would send the price of everything up in the U.S., hyperinflation as the U.S. dollar loses value. Now, I would say that's a huge oversimplification. So if one of the country's reserve assets is MIA, the dollar being worth less, well, I guess that makes sense, or at least 56% of one of the country's reserve assets being MIA. At least some level, that makes sense. And also, less gold makes what's left worth more. There's that. So you could say this idea that the dollar isn't backed by anything would mean that it's now worth less, okay, but I wouldn't say that really gets into what would happen. I think what would happen involves grandstanding. Now, what are we talking about here? Let me get 2 points in. First, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says the gold is there. Kind of waves off the whole topic. He says he'll happily arrange an inspection for any senator interested in seeing the vaults. Now, do you have to believe him? No. But if he says this when it's not true and that lie is uncovered, well, it's going to call into question everything he says going forward. He just has a lot to lose if that's a lie. Now, the next is that even if you don't care for Trump, you have to admit that he's brilliant at building common cause. And one way he does that is by stirring up controversy and then pointing in a direction. So he gets the public stirred up and angry about something that he too is also angry about. Common cause and common enemy. Elon Musk is also very good at that. So regardless of my personal opinion of what we'll find out about the U.S. gold holdings at Fort Knox, it's clear that Elon and Trump are patching into a hot wire here. It reminds me of the Winston Churchill quote, "Never waste a good crisis." Now, that isn't commentary on any of this being wrong or right, good or bad. It's more to say that we're looking at the kind of debate that people enjoy. Sometimes the real treasure was the friends we made along the way, I guess, or maybe the arguments we made along the way. But what would really happen if the gold was missing? Well, first of all, it would create a complete distrust of past government. And I say past because the first thing the current government would do is point to the prior guys. And we can bet Trump and Elon would be the most vocal mudslingers if they uncovered something like the gold being missing. This is common cause. They'd have the villagers lighting torches that same day. And you can also bet that we'd be talking about what we're going to do about it next. Now, where did it go? Was it lent out without proper approval? Would a new government be able to chase down past debts? To me, it seems pretty clear this is what would really happen. We would mobilize the recovery team. Just go get the gold back. Now, I don't think it's infeasible to say we'd see some kind of first step in reclaiming what was lost before we'd see a loss of faith in the US dollar. Now, because this is all just some big thought experiment, let's take a look at what that might mean. Well, first off, the 147.3 million troy ounces of gold held at Fort Knox according to official records, is worth just over $432 billion at current market value. Now, what would recovering that loss look like? Now, look, I'm not suggesting anything here, but let's look at some numbers. We've heard about the $183 billion given to Ukraine since Russia's invasion in February of 2022. Now, Trump just recently said it was $350 billion, and those aren't dots that I'm trying to get anybody to connect, but I'm saying that that's what this would look like. If a past government lost our gold and a past government gave aid to some foreign entity, well, maybe we would see a quick reaccounting of how that past aid was meant to be paid back. I'm not saying these are the things we should do. Let's just be clear. I'm just saying these are the things that could happen. And if we just continue the thought experiment, private gold ownership here in the United States is estimated to be somewhere near 836 million troy ounces. 26,000 metric tons equals 835.9 million troy ounces. Now, I don't know how anyone comes up with that kind of figure, but if that's true, that's 5.5 times as much gold as the official reports say we have stored at Fort Knox, about 3.2 times more than the total U.S. government holdings of 261.5 million troy ounces. Now, if those numbers are anywhere near accurate, that is a lot of gold, and it has to include massive institutional holdings. Now, why am I bringing up private holdings? Well, government confiscation comes up a lot around here, and I've always pointed out how unlikely it is. It's nearly impossible and probably wouldn't amount to much unless those numbers are actually accurate and the government was going after institutional holdings. Now, it's worth noting that in 1933, when the country would have been big on doing the patriotic thing, Roosevelt's executive order only led to about 14.5 million ounces being turned in. That's less than a tenth of the official number held at Fort Knox. So public confiscation might not ever amount to much, but some kind of nationalization of private holdings might. Now, I think that all of that is still incredibly unlikely, and the biggest reason is probably the most basic. Doing this means the government would have to go from building common cause, creating a common enemy, to becoming the enemy. Nationalizing private gold holdings would no longer let them blame somebody else for being the bad guy. So let's just say it again. This isn't what I think the United States should do if the gold was missing. I'm just pointing out that I don't think we're on the verge of a gold price explosion, and I don't think we're on the verge of confiscation. I think there's just a far more likely scenario in either case here. Now, maybe I'm in the minority. There's a book titled The Mandibles. I think the full title is The Mandibles, a Family, 2029 through 2047. I'll have a link in the description. Now, the book revolves around a debt crisis in the United States and how the entire economy collapses. And then it deals with gold, it deals with confiscation, it deals with using that gold to pay foreign debts, and then a little bit of a surprise return at the end. I don't want to spoil it. Now, the reason I bring this up is that it tracks along the lines of the suggestions I've seen in videos, that no confidence in the US dollar would lead to immediate hyperinflation and the US economy would more or less just collapse. Now, this is a good book, and I've mentioned it before, but the part that I think the author got completely wrong is that the U.S. would just go down without a fight, roll over, and become a passive debtor nation. The author was born in the U.S., and she spends time here, but she was a British citizen living in London when she wrote the book. Maybe that's how we look from the outside. And this isn't a book review. I've probably forgot more about the book than I remember, but in her defense, she did set it up with a very different U.S. presidential administration. What I'm saying here, though, is I think things would go a lot differently. Differently how? Well, differently in that it would be a different kind of chaos. So not just economic chaos here domestically with hyperinflation and gold price going to the moon. It would probably be something more like foreign conflict. The U.S. just doesn't have a history of rolling over. So we're not saying any of this is right. We're just saying it's probably more likely. And I think what we're really saying is, let's just hope the gold is there. And let's call it good there. Let us know what you think would happen if the gold was not in Fort Knox. Would the price of gold and just about everything else suddenly spike? Or would there be some kind of other reckoning? Let us know. And then while you're in the comments, be sure to hit that like button if you found any of this interesting. Be sure you're subscribed with notifications turned on if you want to hear more on the topic. And if you're still here, thanks again for watching. I always appreciate your time. Take care.